Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So tonight I'm going to do this brief hangout talking about this tragedy out of Pittsburgh. And I just want to share my thoughts about this situation. Before I get started, I want to send my condolences to the victims of that horrific tragedy. 11 people were killed at a synagogue. A white supremacist by the name of Robert Bowers went into a synagogue in Pittsburgh and shot and killed 11 people. One of the people that he killed was a 97-year-old person who was a survivor of the Holocaust. Now, I know it's late and probably not that many people are going to tune in tonight, but I just felt the need to go ahead and do this video, do it live so I don't have to deal with rendering and all that kind of stuff. Before I go any further in this video, I also want to tell people that I plan to do a response to all those people who left comments in my video about that young Black leadership summit that took place. So you all can look forward to that. Hopefully it'll be tomorrow night. But I wanted to talk about this situation. So you had a white supremacist by the name of Robert Bowers go into a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and he proceeded to kill 11 people there of different ages. This man went in there with 3 pistols, and he had a semi-automatic rifle. Now, this man was captured by the police. Apparently, he got into a shootout with the police. They shot and wounded him, and he's in a hospital, and he faces 23 state charges and 29 federal charges. And the Justice Department is seeking a death penalty in the case. Also, it should be pointed out that shortly before this killing took place, he said that they are trying to commit genocide on my people. And he said he just wanted to kill the Jews. And somewhere else I read that he said that all Jews must die. So this is clearly a hate crime. You know, this man went in there with the intent to kill Jews because of their faith. You know, so there's no ambiguity here. And then also his social media is full of anti-Semitism, where he compared Jews to Satan and where he talked about how Make America Great Again cannot succeed as long as Jews infest this country. That's what he said. Also, he had racist rants on his social media against African Americans. You know, he used the N-word nearly 20 times against African Americans. In his social media post, he referenced nooses and ropes and hanging several times in his social media references. Now, I just want to take some time to share my opinions about this situation. You know, obviously it's a horrific tragedy, and I hope that this man is punished to the full extent of the law. I mean, this is a man who killed innocent people simply because of their faith. And I condemn that. I condemn any kind of racist attacks against people, any kind of bigoted attacks against people simply because of their faith. And as many people know, I'm a Muslim. You know, that's a religious minority in this country. And as a religious minority, and just as an African American, given the history that African Americans have endured of discrimination and oppression and stuff like that, I identify with the plight of all people who are discriminated against, you know, based on their religion or their race or their ethnicity. So I sympathize with this situation. You know, I'm concerned about the plight of these people who were killed simply because of their faith. I mean, in this country, people persecute Muslims, condemn Muslims because of their faith. And in fact, it's okay to discriminate against Muslims in this country. You had a travel ban against Muslims in this country. And that brings me to like one of the main points that I want to make in this video. You have an administration, the Trump administration, that has basically coddled white supremacists. Not only have they coddled them, they have encouraged them, they have vouched for them. Like Donald Trump has said, you know, there were some fine people that participated in that Charlottesville riot that took place, that Charlottesville white supremacist demonstration that took place. He said that some of those people were very fine people. Those are Donald Trump's words. Not only did he say that, this man cut back funding that was used to investigate these white supremacist groups. Despite all this evidence that white supremacist groups are the greatest threat to the American people. They are a bigger threat than these foreign-bred terrorists, these so-called Muslim extremists, these jihadis. They are a much bigger threat, according to many studies that have been done. Now, I'm going to share my screen for a second so you can see this article that talks about how Donald Trump cut funding for investigating these types of groups. So if you can bear with me a second, I'm going to share my screen. And this article will be in the description box so that you can read it for yourself. But this is important to point out. So here's the article right here. It's from The Hill. You know, this is a mainstream website that talks about different policies in the federal government. And this article is entitled, Trump Cuts Funds to Fight Anti-Right-Wing Violence. So it says the Trump administration's decision to cut federal funding for groups fighting right-wing violence has come under new scrutiny following the president's controversial response to violence at a white supremacist rally. And that goes back to my point. I mean, you have Negroes that are actually defending Donald Trump, that actually support Donald Trump, a man who called these white supremacists some very fine people. And that just tells you how thoroughly lost a lot of our people are. But my point in addressing this is because here you have an administration that has coddled these people, and instead of funding investigations against these types of organizations that commit this violence, this man took away funding. As this article points out, it's a disgrace that he cut counter-violence extremism funding for white supremacists and neo-Nazis. He cut that. And, you know, it's just a disgrace. And then now we see the result of him cutting this. You got this terrorist attack that took place at this synagogue where 11 people were killed. You had that shooting that took place at a Kroger's near Louisville, Kentucky, which I did a video about, where you had this guy by the name of Gregory Allen Bush go into a Kroger's and shoot and kill a man, you know, by shooting him in the back of his head and shooting him multiple times after his body hit the ground in front of his grandson. And then this man proceeded to go outside of the Kroger's and shoot a black woman to death in the parking lot. This is what happens when you cut funding for this type of investigation against these hate groups. Now, at the same time, they're cutting funding for investigation of the far right and these racist white supremacist groups. They're stepping up their investigation of so-called black identity extremists. Now, if you can't see the problem with that, then something's wrong with you. So let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Let me go back. Stop sharing my screen. Then I want to make a few other points. Shout out to Frankie Robertson. Okay, so I'm going to continue on. So you had that point, you know, the lack of funding to investigate these groups. So it's no wonder that you have violence like this. I mean, when you look at this kind of situation, you have to say that blood is on Donald Trump's hands. You know, his blood is on his hands because he cut back funding for the investigation of these white supremacists. Blood is on his hands because his rhetoric and his co-signing of white supremacists have helped fuel these types of incidents, have helped perpetuate this kind of violence. Also, one thing that I want to talk about is like how anti-Semitism and white supremacy are like twins of one another. They go hand in hand. The same people that hate Jews hate black people. The same people that have all kinds of slurs that they use against Jewish people use the N-word against black people. You know, as I pointed out, this man made racist rants not only against Jews, but also against black people. This man called black people the N-word over 20 times in his social media. This man talked about nooses, ropes, and hanging, lynching of people, black people, in his social media. So there's a connection between these white supremacists and anti-Semitism. You know, those people that were marching in Charlottesville, not only were they racist against black people, but they were anti-Semitic in their chants, in their rallying calls. It was echoing the statements of the Nazis. And many of these alt-right people are Nazis. They openly use the Nazi salute. So there's a connection between white supremacy and anti-Semitism. And that connection should cause us to work with other groups that are targeted by white supremacists. You know, these white supremacists target Jews, they target Latino people, they target Muslims, they target immigrants, they target anybody that's different from them. And all these groups that are the targets of these white supremacists need to unite around common issues. That's what we need to do, and fight this common enemy of these white supremacists. So that's something that I have to point out. And, you know, another thing that I want to talk about briefly is just compassion for fellow human beings. You know, some people will say, well, these weren't black people, so why should I even care about it? These were Jews. It doesn't have anything to do with black people. Why should I even talk about that? You know, I think that that kind of mentality is a narrow-minded mentality. It's a myopic mentality. It's a foolish mentality, because these same people that have no sympathy for others expect others to have sympathy for them. You know, this man is no different from a Dylan Roof. This man, just like Dylan Roof went into that church and killed 9 innocent black people, this man went into a synagogue and killed 11 innocent Jewish people. You know, it's the same type of thing. Both acts were motivated by hate. Both people were white supremacists. Both people are terrorists, and both people need to be condemned. And we should stand up, you know, just as we expect people to have compassion for those 9 people that were killed in Charleston, South Carolina by Dylan Roof. We should have the same compassion for Jewish people who were killed at that synagogue. You know, their only crime was practicing Judaism. That was their only crime. And, you know, it just brings me to another point. Like, these people that have this kind of hatred, you know, they feed off of these ridiculous conspiracy theories, you know, where they talk about Jews controlling everything and, you know, the Jews are evil and all that kind of stuff. That's no different from any other kind of prejudice or racism. And that brings me to a point that's very disappointing, you know, a point that I see a lot here in YouTube land. You know, a lot of people that I agree with on a lot of issues, I disagree with them on the issue of anti-Semitism. You know, too often, you know, a lot of the people that are quote unquote pro-black are also anti-Semitic. They express anti-Semitic views where they constantly, you know, hatch up all these conspiracy theories. They constantly, you know, basically present this idea that the Jews control everything and the Jews are evil, you know, and all that kind of stuff. That's no different from any other kind of prejudice. And sadly, you know, what they're doing is they're echoing talking points that they got from white supremacists. You know, these people, you know, talk about the small hats, this and that, using slurs against somebody because of the religion that they practice. You know, it's one thing to condemn, you know, injustice, like, for instance, injustice in Palestine. It's quite another thing to make all kinds of racist and anti-Semitic assumptions about people just because of their religion. And too often you see that here in Black YouTube. And, you know, it's just disappointing because you can't condemn prejudice against Black people while you practice prejudice against Jewish people, why you believe in prejudice against Jewish people. Now, I'm not going to say that, obviously, I don't support the idea that Black people can be racist or anything like that. But you can still, even though you don't have the power to be racist, you still had the power to be bigoted. You still had the power to be prejudiced. And too often, that's what a lot of people practice. And again, they are echoing the sentiments of these white supremacists while they purport to be about fighting white supremacy. They are, in fact, embracing white supremacy and certain talking points. Now, one thing that I want to address is I want to address this issue of Jews and like what has happened to them and how they should learn from this. Like, this tragedy should open their eyes to the tragedy that the state of Israel commits against the Palestinian people every day. You know, the terrorism that they commit against the Palestinian people every day. You know, many innocent Palestinians have been killed at the hands of the Zionist government, you know, the Israeli state. And let me be perfectly clear. There's one, condemning the political situation in Palestine and, the occupied territories and Israel and its policies is not the same as anti-Semitism. It's about condemning political policies, not condemning the entire religion, because there's many Jews that are opposed to some of these oppressive practices of the state of Israel. And, I just think that people, as they suffer in this tragedy, they need to think about other fellow human beings. They need to think about the plight of the Palestinians, the oppression that Palestinians face under occupation, whether we're talking about the situation in Gaza or the West Bank. The Gaza situation is a disaster. That's an open air prison. You have the West Bank, which is still occupied by the Israelis. People are still subjected to violence at the hands of the Israelis. And just as they are condemning the terrorist acts of this man, Robert Bowers, they need to condemn the terrorist acts of the state of Israel that are committed against the Palestinian people. So that's one thing that I had to point out before I close out on this video. It's just a terrible situation, man. I just think that people need to have more compassion towards their fellow human beings. Let me just see what you all are saying. Frankie Robertson said, I totally agree with you. New possibilities. And Bowden said, shaking my damn head. I'm not sure if you're shaking your head at me or if you're shaking your head at the situation. It's a terrible situation, man. It's like, it's just a shame, man, that you have a group of people targeted simply because of their religion, their place of worship being attacked. I mean, again, like I said before, this is no different from the situation involving Dylan Roof going into that church, shooting up that church, or the situation that took place years ago where you had a church bombed and 4 Black girls were killed. A place of worship should be a sanctuary. That should be a place of peace, a place where you're getting in touch with God. It shouldn't be a place where you have to fear being a victim of terrorism. And that's what this is, man. And it's a shame that you have a government under this Trump that is giving these white supremacists a pass, that is cut back on funding investigations of these white supremacist groups. So until you have a government that takes this issue of white supremacy seriously, you will continue to see situations like this. And this should be something that should set off our alarm bells. It should cause us in the Black community to be more vigilant in protecting our churches, our schools, our organizations. And we need to be prepared to defend ourselves physically, not just with words and rhetoric, but with actual weapons. We need to be prepared to defend ourselves. And, I'm sure that the Jewish community is going to be on point and start, making sure that they have security and all that kind of stuff. And we need to do the same because these are serious times. And it's time for us to wake up. Now, I see that a lot of, quite a few people have tuned in. I will be interested in hearing your opinions about this situation. It's just a shame. Again, I have to go back to the point of, about these people on here that profess to be pro-Black, but they're running with white supremacist talking points. They're running with the anti-Semitism of these white supremacists, man. And there's nothing pro-Black about being anti-Semitic. So, yeah, I'm just going to see what y'all have to say before I tune out. I want to thank y'all for tuning in, the people that are watching right now. So let's see. And also, I may do a response to another YouTuber. A YouTuber did a video about social justice warriors. I may do a response to him. And, for people who say like, well, the Jews don't care about us, so why should we be caring about like this tragedy that took place? First of all, I don't think that that's true as a blanket statement. When you look at like the civil rights movement, you will find out that many Jews supported the civil rights movement and continue to support social justice movements today. They supported them not only with their money, but with their lives. A lot of times, they were the attorneys representing people who were victims of discrimination and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, we have to realize that even though people are different, there's still opportunities for people to coalesce around common interests and, common agendas, an agenda that shares, certain objectives. So I just think that we need to be not just sympathetic for the sake of being sympathetic, but we need to also partner with other groups of people to address social justice issues. And, again, there have been plenty of examples of that in the past where Jews have worked with the African-American community around issues dealing with civil rights. So let me see what people are saying before I tune out. Yeah, I am. I'm tired. Yeah, I'm real tired. It's 1:16 here where I am. I don't know what time it is where you are. But yeah, I am tired. But I figured that before I lay down, I had to talk about this because it's very important. And again, I want to remind people that I will be doing a response video to all those Trump trolls that commented on my video about that Young Black Leadership Summit. I have to address that. So let's see. Rita Johnson said on Saturday, a young rabbi complained about Donald Trump. And she said that he mentioned Charlottesville also. Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has created an environment that is conducive for white supremacy. He's created an environment that gives these people a sense of license, like they feel like they are free to express themselves, like they are free to be racist, to be bigoted. It's like he's giving them the okay. He's giving them the green light. He's giving them signals. I was watching a documentary and they were basically, well, actually, I was watching it on the Today Show. They were talking about how these white supremacists felt emboldened by Donald Trump. A white supremacist was talking about how when Donald Trump defended those people in Charlottesville, he felt like Trump was supporting him. He felt like Trump was speaking for him. And many of these people, they know that Trump is speaking in code. He's using racial dog whistles when he talks about making America great again. Making America great again. Like he comes up with that after you had a Black president in the White House for 2 terms. Their idea of making America great again is making America white again. It's an anti-immigrant sentiment, which is rooted in white supremacy and this desire to end what they call white genocide. And they see the browning of America as white genocide. So Donald Trump knows what he's doing. He knows that he's playing a game, and he is pandering to these white supremacists. He is using these white supremacists. And while he uses them and pimps them, his own son-in-law is Jewish, and his daughter converted to Judaism. So he's playing both sides of the fence. He's using these white supremacists. And while he's using them, he's basically giving them a green light. And now this is the fruit that has born as a result of his, his policies and stuff. So, I mean, it's time for people to challenge this man, challenge Trump and his agenda at every step of the way. And the first way that you can challenge his agenda is by voting in these midterm elections. Make sure that you vote. Make sure that you vote for your member of Congress, your member of the Senate, the House of Representatives. Get out there and vote. Vote on a local level so that you can combat this agenda that this man is putting forth. Because make no mistake about it, these people are Donald Trump's bastard children, man. This is what he has promoted. This is the environment that he has created. And this guy, talked about making America great again. Just like that other guy that I did a video about. And, unfortunately, these videos don't get as much attention as they deserve. But the other video that I did was about that, there was that situation where you had that bomber, that sent those bombs to all those people. That guy was an avid Trump supporter, a devoted Trump supporter. And Donald Trump, again, he promotes this violent rhetoric when he encouraged violence against protesters. He's very hostile and disrespectful. So he basically nurtures this kind of hostile environment. He nurtures it by coddling these white supremacists and hate mongers. So, yeah, let me continue on before I close out. Again, I want to thank people for tuning in. Frankie Robinson said, thanks, New Possibilities. Happy to be able to catch you live. We're all a part of one race, and that's the human race, period. Yeah, ideally, we are human beings, and we all should have compassion for one another. But unfortunately, in this society, we still deal with the concept of race and racism, anti-Semitism, religious bigotry. And just as one of the reasons, like I mentioned earlier, that I identify with, the plight of Jews is because I see discrimination against, Muslims, a group of people that are, just happen to practice a religion being, discriminated against. The biggest example would be that travel ban that's been imposed under this Trump administration. You have, open suggestions that Muslims should register with the government and stuff like that. There were statements that Donald Trump made along the campaign trail that were clearly anti-Muslim. And you have a lot of Republicans that make open anti-Muslim statements. And this is no different from anti-Semitism. And I think that this is an opportunity for groups to get together. I mean, the Muslim community should be supportive of this Jewish synagogue that suffered this mass tragedy, because the same people that target the synagogue are the same people that target the mosque. The same hate mongers that hate the Jews hate the Muslims. The same people that hate the Jews hate the immigrants, hate Black people, hate gay people, and they are also sexist. They also have a sexist agenda as well. And that's something that's mentioned in one of these articles that I post in the description box. It talks about how he made derogatory statements about women as well. And, so, the issues of sexism, racism, anti-Semitism, anti-immigrant sentiment, xenophobia, it's all rolled into one. And there's nothing wrong with groups that have similar problems. They're being targeted by the same group of people these white supremacists and the far right. There's nothing wrong with them realizing that they have common interests. There's nothing wrong with intersectionality. You know, it's only common sense for these groups that have common interests to get together. It is idiotic to have every person on their own type of mentality when you're being targeted by the same person. There's strength in numbers. And unfortunately, a lot of our people are so narrow-minded that they can't even grasp the concept of coalitions. They don't see the significance of building coalitions. And by coalitions, it needs to be something built on mutual respect and, you know, equality, not something that's one-sided or lopsided or anything like that. So, yeah, so Christopher Richards said Trump and his stupid goons are going to get everybody killed. He said that the Trump supporter who was sending bombs to kill Obama was also anti-Black, anti-Jewish, and anti-gay. And somebody said that their attorney is Jewish. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to thank y'all for tuning in. You know, for people that are catching this later, I want you to please rate, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think about this situation. What do you think about my statements about anti-Semitism and white supremacy, and anti-Semitism and you know, the so-called pro-Black movement here on YouTube? And one thing that I find odd is like the same people that are so anti-Semitic are the same people that claim to be Hebrews, you know, they claim to be the original Jews and all that kind of stuff. It's like, while they're anti-Semitic, they want to be Semitic. So, so anyway, man, tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. And again, thank you to everyone in the chat room. Peace and blessings.